Welcome back to another TLC D&D video. I have another build here for you. I had so much fun the other day making the ultimate healer and my swordsman build that I thought, there's another kind of character concept that I've had in my head, and when I created it, and I kind of accidentally created it in a campaign, and I realized just how broken it is if you roll well, how crazy of a damage output this class could have very, very quickly. And as such, I wanted to share it here with you. I present to you the Eldritch Gunslinger build. Now, I will say, all right, first and foremost, that we're going to take some... I'm trying to think how best to word it. We're going to kind of make some assumptions. We're going to have to talk to our DM a little bit here. In my mind, I am imagining this character, wielding a six-shooter or revolver off their hip. But in all honesty, if there is not going to be any gunslinger, UA multi-classing here. So if your DM is like, hey, I would prefer not because you're not actually a gunslinger, I don't allow that at my table, then just reword this as, the Eldritch Blaster build. All right, but for me, I have this character concept in my head. I want this to come from a gun off of his hip, old Western style. So that's what we're going to go with it. So, parameters. I went a little off script here, and I am going to say that we will be topping this off at 11th level. Normally, all right, I try to make it so that we top off at 10th. However, I don't feel bad going into 11th, all right? You will never catch me making a 13 level build unless I purposely say, like, hey, this is going to be a higher tier build. This is going to be a higher level build. But just going one extra level, I don't think that I'm breaking too many rules. I feel like a campaign that would have ended at 10th level would have also ended at 11th level. I think that it is safe to assume that I got a little leeway, right? Like I can have one level leeway here and still kind of be within my parameters. And of course, the reason for this is going to become very, very apparent very quickly. So I promise I try to stay 10 levels, but one more does make a world of difference. So I'm going to go ahead and give myself the brevity of giving us 11. Second thing that we want here is we want the ability to pop off as many shots, all right, as many of our Eldritch Blasts as physically possible and as often as possible. We want consistent damage and we want Nova damage. Now, I will say that this build is going to be focused on damage. All right, there's not going to be, there's going to be some natural utility to it just because we will be taking some classes that will just naturally give us the ability to do what we want. But I will say that all of my choices for this class are going down the direction of how to pump out the most damage I can. So with that, let's go ahead and get right on into it here. My race, background, and stats. For my race, I am going Goblin. I know it's a weird choice, and to be honest, you could argue, because we are going to go custom lineage here, you could argue a number of classes would make sense for this. The Shadar Kai would make a great choice for this, especially early on. Going Asamar would be a great choice for gaining that fly speed. There's a changeling I think would really fit this kind of assassin who goes around with a gun on his hip. Like I think you could go with any class, but again, I went the one that again was all about doing damage, and this is really the only class besides a couple that does damage, but also does damage more than just once, and without having to rely on an enemy getting close to us, because very quickly you're going to see this build, we do not want them close to us. In fact, we are going to really push our range here and do some really crazy things once we get to the higher levels, but we'll get there. So why did I go Goblin? All right, first off, we get Fey Ancestry, which is really, really nice. It gives us those advantages on being charmed and things. Nimble Escape, which is basically the rogue's disengage and dash, we can do that as a bonus action instead of an action. So this might be really, really nice as a sorcerer. All right, you know, as a spellcaster, you know, this may very well kind of get us out of the, you know, out of a dangerous situation, you know, to be able to bonus action, disengage, get out of the way, and now I can cast my magic without having disadvantage for being so close. But it's the Fury of the Small that's really going to be the nice one. Fury of the Small, if you don't know, if you attack a target that is considered larger than you, and you are considered a small creature, by the way, if you go goblin, so many creatures you fight will probably be bigger than you, then you can increase the damage by your proficiency bonus whenever you make an attack. And that is a very good way. That is something we want to hear, the way that it is worded. Whenever we make an attack. Not once a turn. It specifically says whenever we make an attack, we can increase the damage by our proficiency bonus. Now, we can only do this up to our proficiency bonus times per day, but that's still, over time, a good amount of damage that otherwise we would have to be casting more spells to do. For your background, completely up to you. I don't even give you an option here. I leave it blank. I leave it a question mark because for me, you know, depending on the race, again, I'm going goblin because that nimble escape I think will really save your ass early on. You know, nothing is more aggravating than when an enemy gets really, you know, gets right up close and personal, starts bashing your head in, and now your spell casting is at disadvantage. You know, and it's just like, holy shit, like my spell slots are already, you know, pretty precious commodity, and now you're making me have to roll at disadvantage, which means I might be missing, like, you know, to have nimble escape and Fear of the Small, I went with goblin. But as I said, there's plenty of reason, plenty of evidence that you can pick other class or other races here and do just as good. So for your background, I leave that blank because I don't know what race you're going to end up picking. Go with whatever, you know, fits the boat for you. All right, for our stats, we will have 8 in our strength. We are going to be a spellcaster after all. We don't have to be very brawny. We don't have to be very big. For our dexterity, we want a 14. That way, if we cast mage armor, and there's going to be a lot of leeway here for our spells. In fact, there's only a couple of things I'm going to say that, hey, you need to take this. Hey, you need to take this. The rest of it's up to you. So if you want to run around with mage armor on, then having a higher dexterity is going to help out with that. We will also have the opportunity to wear medium armor here very, very quickly. So we may want, you know, some dexterity points there just so that we are, you know, able to get a little bit of a bump to our AC. For Constitution, we will start with a 15, but since we're going custom lineage, we will turn that into a 16 right out of the gate. Again, we're going to be kind of squishy. All right, we're going to definitely want to try to, you know, have a nice healthy hit point pool. For intelligence, a 10, right, nice neutral number. Right, it sucks that's not a, you know, positive in any way, but could be worse. Speaking of worse, we have our dumb stat. All right, and that is our wisdom. All right, I don't like when wisdom is a dumb stat because, you know, wisdom is one of the more commonly hit, you know, spell casting DCs. You know, when enemies start flinging spells around, I find that dexterity, wisdom, and charisma are kind of the 3 big ones that get targeted. But, you know, you could probably, if you wanted to, change your dexterity to like a 13 or a 12 and get that wisdom up to a 10, just so then you're neutral. But I'll be honest, in theory, you should be far enough away that enemies should even have trouble casting at you. But we'll get there. So this is my spread, right? Oh, and charisma, of course, 15 with our custom lineage plus 1 there. That will be 16. All right, for our free feat, all right, since we went custom lineage here, all right, we are going to take Eldritch Adept, specifically Agonizing Blast, that all famous powerful invocation that says that, hey, when we use Eldritch Blast, all right, we get to use our charisma modifier on top of it as bonus damage. Now, this is something that kind of needs to be approached. Technically, the way Eldritch Adept is worded is that if you cannot take an Eldritch invocation that you do not meet the prerequisite for. And I'm going to say right here, right now, the very first level is not Warlock. So with that in mind, You may have a DM that says, hey, you cannot take Agonizing Blast because one of the prerequisites is the ability to cast Eldritch Blast, which we will not get until level 2. However, what is also written in Eldritch Adept is that every time you level up, not every time you level up Warlock, every time you level up, you can switch out the Eldritch Invocation that you picked from this particular feat. So, you know, to me, it's like, hey, DM, you know, if you want me at level 1 to take, you know, one of these other feats, you know, or sorry, one of these other invocations, so that I use it for my level 1, that's fine. But just be aware that at level 2, when I multi-class, I am taking Agonizing Blast. So you can either give it to me now, at which point I just won't use it, you know, and I don't really care about it. Like, you know, that can be the trade-off here. Like, you know, I'm picking something that I can't use yet, or not. You know, it's up to you. But bottom line is that I promise you will get to use this, even though technically the way it is worded is that you shouldn't be able to take Agonizing Blast until you have Eldritch Blast. But I don't think any DM is going to be like, you know, super pissed off that you're taking something you can't use. I think they're going to be pretty okay with it. But this is our background. This is where we start. Let's go ahead and get right on into the build. All right, so at level 1, we are taking Divine Soul Sorcerer. The reason we're going Divine Soul Sorcerer right out of the gate is 1, all right, it gives us that Constitution saving throw proficiency, which is excellent. Secondly, we are getting a number of spells, and since we are going Divine Soul Sorcerer, we can dip our toes into not just our own spell list, the Sorcerer spell list, but we now can also take Cleric spells, drastically increasing that utility. And what's really nice is, it doesn't matter. Not for this build. Alright, for this build, you are free to take whatever spells you want out of this situation, because we're gonna be blasting. Alright, that is the whole point of this class, is just how many Eldritch Blasts can we throw out every single round. So because of that, your spells are really up to you. So, you know, throw in Shield, you know, put in Disguise Self, put in Sleep, you know, put in any spell that you think is useful out of combat personally, because in combat, we're going to be using Eldritch Blast the most. Also, in first level, all right, we have Divine Favored by the Gods, which just means that if we happen to miss a saving throw or attack roll, we can add 2d4 and add it to the total. So we get a nice little chance of maybe, you know, turning a miss into a hit, you know, or turning a hey, I'm about to die because I failed a saving throw into a possible success. Which, since we don't have the greatest intelligence and wisdom scores, we may be using this on a saving throw. But it's good, it's solid. I do recommend that if your DM is someone who cares about, like, hey, you choose a Divine Soul Sorcerer, who is it that you are, you know, connecting yourself to? I suggest the Raven Queen, because again, as soon as we hit second level, we are multi-classing into the Raven Queen's, like, preferred, all-knowing Warlock subclass. Alright, we are going Hexblade. Alright, the reason we're going Hexblade is the same reason why any spellcaster who uses Charisma modifier would use and go into Hexblade, right? You know, with Hexblade's Curse, alright, we get extended crit range, alright, we heal when we kill, but most importantly, if we use Hexblade's Curse on a target, which we get on a short rest every time, then all attacks that require a roll on them are increased by our proficiency bonus. Which means as soon as we have the ability to attack multiple times in a round, this damage is multiplied. It increases its damage 2, 3, 4-fold. It will drastically increase returns as we go. It is also, by going Hexblade, we unlock our ability to use medium armor, wield a shield, which, by the way, I don't see why you couldn't. All right, you know, as far as I'm concerned, you know, tell your DM, like, hey, you know, I'm using my magic caster, right? What I use as my magical focus is shaped like a gun. It's you know, it's the revolver on my hip, and maybe I have a smaller shield on my left forearm, right? You know, now I have a decent AC, maybe, you know, and I'm about to pump out a shit ton of damage. So you also now have a melee weapon, which we'll never use. All right, hopefully we'll never have to use it, but, you know, we got it in our back pocket. The real reason, though, and the serious reasons why we are taking Hexblade Warlock here is for Eldritch Blast and, of course, Hex. Alright, at level 3, we are going 2nd level Hexblade Warlock. Alright, this gives us 2 spells that now come back on short rest compared to the 1. We also now get 2 Eldritch Invocations. 2 more, technically, because we had Eldritch Adept. For this, I suggest you take Eldritch Spear, which increases our range out to 300 feet, which is going to become very apparent why we will want this when we get to higher levels. We also want Repelling Blast. Every time we attack with a ray, we can push an enemy back 10 feet. And no, that wasn't a misspoken. Every time that you hit with a ray, you push an enemy back 10 feet. I hope the wheels are starting to turn a little bit here as to why we might want Eldritch Spear out to 300 feet. We also now get another Warlock spell, which now means that we can have 3 Warlock spells in our repertoire. Besides Hex, it's completely up to you what those other 2 spells are. I would suggest having picking spells that are good out of combat, because again, in combat, you are going to be slinging Eldritch Blast. Alright, at levels 4 through 6, we are going right back to our Divine Soul Sorcerer. Alright, so at level 4, alright, we will now be a Sorcerer 2. We unlock Font of Magic. We get a couple more spells, another spell slot, etc., etc. At level 5, alright, we're going to kind of speed through some of these that, don't give us too hell of a lot, because Sorcerer is sadly one of those classes that, in my mind, has a couple of dead levels. It does have a few levels where it's like, oh, I get 3 2nd level spells instead of 2 now, not the craziest of things, so we'll kind of blow through some of these. At level 5, we're now Sorcerer 3, which means we now have our Meta Magic unlocked. You must take Quicken Spell. The second option is up to you. Be warned, most of what we do in combat is going to be Eldritch Blast. So taking Twin Spell might look appealing, but unless you're planning on taking this character down a different direction, there's no need for it, because you cannot Twin Spell Eldritch Blast, especially not now, because at 5th level, Eldritch Blast splits into 2 rays. So because it can target multiple targets, you cannot Twin Spell Eldritch Blast. So I would instead maybe take either Subtle Spell, or maybe you end up taking I'm forgetting the name of the meta magic option, the one that lets you spend a sorcery point and change the damage type. That way if you're ever up against an enemy that is vulnerable to something, or suddenly immune to force damage, that would really fuck up this build really quickly. So in fact, I would almost say, like, hey, that second option probably should be the one that lets you switch the damage type of the spell, just to cover your bases. And at level 6, all right, we will another Sorcerer, so we are now Sorcerer 4, which gives us our ability score improvement, +2 to our Charisma, so that we now have an 18 Charisma. All right, we will not see 20. All right, I wish we could, but we got too many other things going on here. All right, so let's do a quick check-in. All right, now, although I may carry this, to 11th level, this class to 11th level, this build to 11th level, I do want us to at least stay at level 5 when it comes to our first check-in. So, assuming we spend our first turn casting both Hex and Hexblade's Curse, we can, and that we are spending our turns casting Eldritch Blast twice. All right, and this is something that we can do. All right, rules is written. All right, when we attack with a cantrip, we can immediately we can quicken spell another cantrip, which means at 5th level, we can attack with 4 Eldritch Blasts. Okay, this is how come I said, don't worry about big flashy spells. You will be doing more with less. So, our damage, once, kind of broken down, looks like this. We have 4 rays, so that's 4d10. Plus the Charisma modifier for each of them, all right, which at this time it is 4. Remember, our Charisma stat does not increase until level 6. Our character level is 6. So because of that, all right, it's still only +12, all right, kind of sucks, all right, but it is what it is. All right, we then have, since we attacked 4 times, all right, that means that Hex gets procced 4 times. So does our Hexblade's Curse. And for the fuck of it, all right, since we have a proficiency bonus of this time of 2, I think it is safe to assume that in this particular situation, I throw in 1 Fury of the Small. All right, so we, get a nice little bump of 2 points of damage here. Which means that if all 4 attacks hit, that you are looking at an average of 62 points of damage per round. But you're not done yet. Remember, every time you hit with one of those Eldritch Blast rays, you push the enemy back 40 feet. Which means if you rolled well, you could have pushed that enemy 40 feet away from you and your allies. This can be combat changing. If you are fighting an enemy that has mediocre to non-existent range and you force it every turn to move, let's say even if just 3/4 of your attacks hit, to make them move 30 feet back, you may force it every turn to have to spend its action dashing in order to get close to one of your allies. This ability is huge, and it can definitely change the outcome of combats if you hit them often enough. Alright, levels 7 through 9, more Sorcerer. Alright, we're going right back into Sorcerer here. We are good with Warlock. So at level 7, alright, we're now Sorcerer 5. Hey, we unlock 3rd level spell slots. So take that Fly spell, take that Fireball, take that Hypnotic Pattern. Alright, there's plenty of good 3rd level spells. But again, you keep in mind that the spells you are taking, at these points, that hopefully, anyway, for how cool having Fireball is and that stuff is, always keep in mind that 1, our concentration will always be used for Hex. All right, it may not seem like a lot, but as we have learned here, it adds up a lot over time. So I would highly, highly suggest that 1, that we use, keep in mind, I guess basically what I'm trying to say is just keep in mind that there's some spells that I know are usual, like givens, right? Like you take Fireball if you are given Fireball. All I'm saying is that we will be spending a lot of our time doing these other things that I don't think, with Eldritch Blast, I don't want you to fall into the pit of taking those spells that you're used to taking and then using spells for that and then missing out on all this monstrous damage that you could be doing by just using a cantrip. So do what you can, do what you want, but it is entirely up to you. Alright, at level 8, alright, we are going Sorcerer again with 6. Alright, that means more Fireballs, alright, more haste, more flies, more whatever. But more importantly, more Sorcerer points. Alright, this means more chances for us to, quicken spell a cantrip and shoot more rays at our enemies. Level 9, same thing. Alright, we are now Sorcerer 7, which means we unlock our 4th level spell slot. But again, we are just looking for those extra Sorcerer points. Alright, level 10 and 11 for that matter. So finishing up this class, we are going to do one last multi-class here. And that is, of course, into Fighter. Now, I will admit, I am only going Fighter for one thing, and one thing only. Sure, it gives us heavy armor. Second Wind is fine. Getting a freebie fighting style, which would probably, I think the only one that would maybe make sense is the +1 to our AC. Awesome, whoop-de-doo, good for us. But we all know why we're here. We are here for that action surge. And yes, according to the Sage Advice Compendium, which takes the most up-to-date published workings of Wizards of the Coast, they have compiled that it shows that if you use action surge, yes, you can cast multiple spells multiple times in one turn. Prepare for a shit ton of Eldritch Blasts. So, with that in mind, let us look to see and feast your eyes on some of the craziest numbers I have ever cracked in this game. Again, trusting that we are able to, get our Hex and our Hexblade's Curse off on the first turn, then from that point forward, because we are level 11, our Eldritch Blast fires 3 rays, which means action, Eldritch Blast, bonus action, Quicken Spell, second Eldritch Blast. That gives us 6 rays of Eldritch Blasts. So that is 6d10 plus 24 for the actual spell. We then have 66 of the Hex if each one is procced. Hexblade's Curse, since we've hit them 6 times with a proficiency bonus of 4, brings us to 24 points of damage. And because I'm assuming that at this point, since we have 4 uses of our Fury of the Small, let's say that, Fury of the Small. Yeah, we're firing fucking, pieces of dog fur out there. That you can at least get it out maybe once before you go Nova. And with that, if all hits, if every attack makes their mark, you will average 108 points of damage in a round in 6 attacks. This is level 11, and technically all you used was something you get back on a short rest, 1 of your spells, and 1 of your sorcery points. That's it. And this is the amount of damage we can deliver if we hit. And this is a build, I have to say that, because, we only have an 18 in that charisma. We don't have anything giving us advantage. So just be aware. Kind of. I should say kind of. We'll talk about it. All right, but before we do that, let's go Nova. All right, let's do Action Surge. And let's do it all fucking over again. Basically, we double. Alright, we just take our number and we basically double it. Alright, so that is the only real big increase, besides just simply doubling it, is the Fury of the Small. I'm assuming then that we dump everything. Alright, we use all of our reserve Furies of the Small, which for me, I had 3. Alright, I figured, hey, I've used 1, before. Alright, I got 3 left. If all attacks hit, which does require at this point 12 attacks to hit, which is statistically not reasonable, right? Like maybe 9 of these 12 are going to hit, but I'm going for pure numbers, right? Like I'm going for pure shock factor. This is this is the average damage if all 12 of your attacks hit. You will do 228 points of damage. You will also push your enemy back 120 feet. That's fucking nuts. That's off a cliff. That's off the battle map. This is why we took that beautiful, wonderful invocation that extends our Eldritch Blast out to 300 feet. Because the party, will be out of range of any shit they want to throw. They will never be out of reach for us, which is the point of this build. Now, before when I said that, hey, there is a chance that we will not have the ability to have multiple advantage. I don't know why I'm blanking so hard. To have advantage on this. The thing is that there is a possibility in order to do this. And in order to do this, what you do is that there is a spell that does require concentration, I do believe. So you may be giving up Hex. For us, for a wizard, or for a sorcerer, it is our 4th level spell slot, so we'd only be able to do it once, and we would be giving up 12d6 points of possible damage. However, by drastically increasing the likelihood of us hitting, it may be worth it. And the spell that I'm talking about is, of course, Greater Invisibility. It is a wonderful spell, especially for us. Alright, what it does is that it is concentration, it lasts for a minute, and it makes us invisible. And, according to rules as written, If you cannot see a target, but they can see you, then you have disadvantage on attacking them. They have advantage on attacking you. Now, your DM might rule it that, hey, once you start attacking, you know, especially with this character where fucking 12 rays of light are coming from one spot, it would make sense if the DM's like, yeah, they at least they still don't know exactly where they are, where you are, so they will have disadvantage trying to attack you, but you only have advantage on one round. That's fine, because that's all we need. So it may be worth to maybe guarantee or drastically increase the likelihood that more of these attacks hit. It would almost maybe be worth giving up that hex, the concentration on hex, to instead do greater invisibility. But this is it. This is the build, and what is so awesome is, again, this is just, the average of 6 rays is 108 points of damage, which means even if only 5 of them hit, that's still only gonna, that's gonna be like 90 something points of damage. If 4 of them hit, that's gonna be like high 80s, low 90s to hit. If 3 of them hit, we're gonna drop down to like the 60s. Like, this is still crazy damage, even if a couple of your rays end up missing. And the fact that if you do miss, the only thing you will be missing out is 1 sorcery point. Possibly, once this fight ends, your Hexblade's Curse, which comes back on a short rest, a hex spell that comes back on a short rest, and a Fury of the Small Witch, granted, does not come back until you go and sleep. But that's it. You are literally only missing one thing that you cannot get back by taking some form of small rest today. This is a crazy build, and I love it. I hope you do too. I hope as you look at this, you're like, there's no fucking way, only to realize that, holy shit, this guy, he's got it right. I know I was taking some, some brevity here when it came to, assuming that all 12 of the attacks hit and stuff like that, but I'm willing for this one to just show you what could be possible. And it's not, it's not like we're firing these Eldritch Blasts with, a 13 charisma, right? Like, we have at least maybe a decent, and who knows, maybe our DM didn't know what they were doing, and maybe they gave us a Rod of the Pact or something, and now we have a +1 to our attacks, if they are Warlock base, which the Eldritch Blast would definitely be considered. I think that you would find that, especially going Nova, I think you would find that more often, more of them hit than miss, which means this damage is possible. Whatever the case, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope that it was as entertaining for you to listen to as it was for me to make, because cracking these numbers just made me fucking like, there's no way that this should be legal. There's no way this is possible, but it is. Try it out next time. Make your DM absolutely hate you, not to mention have to make battle maps that are, 300 feet wide. Whatever the case, I hope you enjoyed, and I will catch you next time.